Great. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. My name is Jacinta. I'm the partnerships manager at Make My Money Matter. And who we are, we're a campaign that launched in 2020, trying to help individuals and organizations in understanding the role of their money, especially around the climate emergency. So as you were saying, Camilla, this is not something that most of us think about. And so that with no further ado on my side, I'll show you a quick video that kind of encompasses why we started the campaign. And hopefully you can hear the audio on that too. Please let me know if you can, because it's annoying to watch something without sound.
It's actually never occurred to me before that my pension could be something that would create change.
So that's the dream, yeah. Tell me about it.
I would wonder why I hadn't been told about it already.
It doesn't sound like it can or should work.
I think most people don't know what their pension's investing in.
It'd be good to know more about the companies that my pension is being invested in, whether they're doing good in the world.
Who are they? Who are they run by? What are they doing? Where are they?
What? Invest in these.
You're reading it's like a list of horror.
Making weapons and ammunition, it's a no-go.
Cigarette companies, coal mines, oil companies, gambling. No way.
I feel like something better could be done with my money.
Oh, well, there you go. That is a stunning list of good things. If my pension went to these things, that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Social housing, infrastructure like schools and hospital.
I would definitely want my money to be invested in building wind farms, tackling climate change.
And companies that treat their workers well. This is my kind of list.
And I, as a kind of customer, can feel, first of all, better about where my money is going, but also you would assume that those pensions would do actually quite well, probably make more money ultimately.
It would make me feel better in some small way, that the things that I believe in, the things that I think are important and are important to me are being reflected in how my money is being used.
I would probably go so far as to say I would increase my pension contributions.
Yeah, I'm going to go make some calls and I'll leave here.
Now I'm going to run back home and check.
Understanding that the money could be working and obviously working to contribute to a better world. That's pretty amazing.
So those are real people with real reactions. That was just before the pandemic when we were allowed to film and see people and go around in trains. But that gives you an idea of that disconnect that most of us have in terms of our money and their investments. But every good story starts with characters. So a bit more about our campaign and how we started. So our co-founder is Richard Curtis, who you might or might not recognize from this picture, but maybe you will know about his films, Love Actually, Notting Hill, For Weddings and a Funeral. All of those movies we've all watched too many times. And on the other half of his life, and this is something that a lot of people may not know about Richard, Richard is a very big campaigner on the big issues that we face as humanity. That's why he's a UN Sustainable Development Goals ambassador. And as part of that journey, he came across the TED Talk telling the story of Bronwyn King, who we see here. She's an Australian oncologist, and she met with her financial advisor when she was 30-something for the first time. And whilst she was trying to cure lung cancer with her patients, she realized that a lot of her money was invested in tobacco companies. So this was a real aha moment for her in seeing how her money was undermining all of the other decisions she was taking in the other part of her life, but also an aha moment for Richard when he saw this TED Talk that we'll send around later. I won't show it now, but really showcasing that dichotomy that most of us as citizens, as individuals have in terms of doing things to have a better or in a way less impact to fuel climate change, but might not bring in money into those discussions or conversations. And money is not the first thing that we think about in terms of climate action. Climate change, and I'm sure, I mean, I don't have to tell you people from your network, you already know this very well, but it is one of the biggest challenges, if not the one challenge that we have as humanity at the moment. And all of the resources, all of the energy, all of the organizations and policies that need to be in place are not enough if we don't put the money, if we don't unlock the private capital behind that to make sure that we tackle climate change and that we invest in the solutions that will get us out of the situation in which we are now. So why pensions? And it's not because they're the sexiest and funnest of topics, but we started with pensions because there's a lot of money invested in pensions. Camilla just mentioned there's around £3 trillion invested in UK pensions, and that amounts to $50 trillion globally across the biggest market. So that's a lot of money, and a lot of money that, if could be unlocked in terms of tackling climate change, could have a very big impact. And to be able to tell this story, because pensions can sometimes be a bit dry or complex, when we first launched, we looked at the impact of having a green pension compared to the typical things that we're doing, or that most people think about when they think about taking climate action. So we found that greening your pension, individually speaking, is 21 times more effective at cutting your carbon footprint than stopping flying, going veg, and switching to an energy supplier combined. So that's a very big impact. Not to say that those things are not very important to do, but if we are doing them, and if we are making greener decisions in every part of our lives, it does call for us enhancing that impact, so to speak, by looking at where our money is going through our pensions. How our pensions work, I mean, it's a very complex system. We've tried to simplify it here with a diagram. So as employees and employers, every month we contribute to a pension pot. There's a percentage that goes from the employee, and a percentage that goes from the employer in most cases. This pension pot is managed by a pension provider normally, and it invests in funds. That means that it's funds that include companies across loads of different industries across the world. And that's accruing interest for our future selves for when we do retire and we receive that money. This would mean that it's invested in everything from oil, gas, deforestation, driving, commodities, tobacco, weapons, also on good stuff, renewables. There's lots of different things, but as trends has happened, it's mostly in the not so friendly industries that it's been invested. But there is a growing recognition, both through regulation, but also from growing demand from customers, that this needs to change, because that money, even if we think that is money for the future, is shaping the world now. So this presents a real dichotomy, we think, for individuals and organizations that are really trying to be green and are more sustainable. So that's where our campaign is trying to give people and organizations more voice and choice on how their money is invested. For businesses and employers, in the UK, the way pensions are set up, the agency of employers is very important. And that's why, alongside doing that 21x stat storytelling that we did, we also wanted to tell this in a way that's digestible for CEOs, for CFOs, for sustainability managers, for directors of operations in charge of pensions, to really bring down that kind of jargon wall that sometimes surrounds pensions, and really be able to paint a picture of like the impact of pensions against all of the operational things that those companies might be doing. Because as things stand, the standard setters and the certifications that are the most well-renowned for businesses don't include pensions or money in general, but pensions specifically are not included. So it's not something that businesses would usually be thinking about when they're thinking about building their sustainability strategies. And we want to change that, because we found, after a very comprehensive piece of research that we did with a research house and in partnership with Scottish Widows, a very big pension provider, we found that the pensions emissions of UK businesses are 7 times higher than their company carbon footprint. And for those of you who, like me, are not great with numbers, you can see a diagram here of how it compares. So it's great that businesses are cleaning up their supply chains, that they're looking at the energy that they use, the transport that they use, that they're insulating their offices. But pensions and money need to be part of that conversation because they have a very big impact in terms of their carbon footprint. And it's not only because of their carbon footprint. We've also conducted different types of polls and research looking at what the attitudes of employees and customers were. And it's no surprise to see that they like to see their employers walking the talk. And 72% of employees want their pensions to be invested sustainably, that there is a growing demand for that, especially as people become more aware about the impact of their money. And this is something very tangible that they can have agency on. So once they learn about this, they do expect that from employers and businesses that they consume as well. And this surprised me a lot, is that employees named green pensions as one of the top 5 benefits that they would expect from a new employer if they were looking for a job, alongside holidays and flexible working. So it's also showing how the trends are changing for us in terms of what we expect in terms of sustainability and greener organizations. But we want to make all money matter, and that's the name of our campaign. And that's why we recently launched our campaign on banks. So our banks are in a very dangerous relationship with the fossil fuel industry. And we launched this campaign. You may have seen our open letter in the news, signed by people like Stephen Fry and Emma Thompson, climate activists and scientists, that really called on banks, on the big five high street banks, HSBC, Barclays, Santander, NatWest, and Lloyds, to stop directly financing fossil fuels. Because we know that the science is very clear. It shows that we don't need any new oil, gas, and coal expansion, especially if we want to limit ourselves within the global warming of 1.5. That means that if we keep putting money behind expanding new projects, then we won't be able to keep within those limits that the Paris Agreement set out. But despite this, these banks, the big five that we're calling in the high street, have funneled 368 billion pounds into the fossil fuel industry after the Paris Agreement was signed. The fossil fuel industry cannot exist without banks, but banks cannot exist without their customers. So that's why we launched this campaign, to really let the industry know that their clients care about this and that they will be looking at what they're doing with their money. It might not be the direct money that we have on our savings and accounts, so it doesn't work like pensions, but it is the customer voice that also enables that to get them to notice that we don't want them to be doing that with money. So how do we work as a campaign? We do all sorts of things, and at the heart of our campaign is running these high-profile public campaigns to raise awareness really about the issue. So we're not financial advisors. What we're doing is really trying to break down the barriers that have been all of these years in terms of like people relating themselves to their money, that be individuals, but also businesses, in terms of helping them see the impact via storytelling and this kind of research that I was talking about, but also around creative content. We enable the public and organizations through public actions to really raise their voices and help convene this growing demand both on pensions and banks. We work with influencers, with high-profile speakers. You see here Christiana Figueres, one of the architects of the Paris Agreement. And we work a lot with the industry as well. We engage with them to make sure that they comply with the commitments that they've set out for themselves, but also they accelerate action. So we're always kind of bringing the bar, setting the bar higher for them, so that they know that people are watching. And lastly, we engage with a lot of businesses and all kinds of employers, helping them have these conversations internally, but also like sparking this conversation sometimes for the very first time for sustainability managers, for CEOs, for organizations that might be doing lots of things to be greener, but might not have thought about their money as part of that journey. And this is just an example of the kind of content that we create. It's a very short film that hopefully you will enjoy.
I'm Guy Byrne-Woods, CEO of the Forestry Felling Syndicate. On behalf of the global logging industry, I want to thank people like you for collectively investing hundreds of millions with us. Your pension funds, no matter how piddly, all add up. And with all your cash, we've been able to destroy more natural habitat than we ever thought possible. From Alaska to the Amazon, Siberia to Sudan. Synergy. We've also used your investments to fight pesky government restrictions. In fact, every single minute, we managed to clear about 30 football fields of forest. There goes another one. But we can only keep up our record-breaking work with your help. With your continued investment, we can do even more together next year to make money and destroy the planet. So remember, your money is literally changing the world. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
So that was our spoof Christmas message from a few years ago. Just another example of how we're helping people understand these concepts that sometimes are very complex around money. In building this movement, we've had some very high-profile support. You can see here Alok Sharma, who used to be the COP26 president, Amina Mohammed, the Deputy UN Secretary General, Christiana, who I talked about earlier. And when we launched and throughout our campaign, we've had the support of Mark Carney, who used to be the governor of the Bank of England and is now the UN Special Envoy on everything climate action and finance. I won't bore you with lots of numbers, but some that I would like to highlight from here. For example, we're talking about how there's around 30 trillion invested in the UK pensions. And since we launched in 2020, alongside other organizations also working in the space, we've managed to get via all of this pressure from the corporates, from the individual members of the public really engaging with their pension providers to get 1.3 trillion of assets under management now committed to what we call robust net zero targets. That means net zero by 2050, but most importantly, halving the emissions of those portfolios by 2030. We've done this with the help of more than 100 business partners, lots of people taking action through our website. And we've seen an 85% of increase in the issue awareness amongst the general public, which we think is a real good win, given when we started, most people didn't know much about this. So what can you do? You might be thinking as part of this network and as an employers, but also as individuals yourselves. There's a few things, and I'm sure there'll be lots of other ideas as well when we go into the Q&A. The first one is directly engaging with both your pension providers and your banks. You can very easily do that through our website. You'll find the tools there, lots of resources. You can take action. So we put out public actions that the general public, but also businesses can take in terms of letting the pensions industry and banks know that they are watching them and that they would like to change. We have an upcoming public action with businesses in terms of banks, and help us spread the word. We're all parts of networks, but also like friends, family, employees, colleagues, customers, lots of different audiences that I'm sure would benefit from knowing more about the impact of money. So that you'll find on our website, but also feel free to get in touch with me. I'm sure Camila will send around my details in terms of working with us and seeing how we could partner to help more people know about this. I don't want to run over time, and I know we're not doing questions now, so I'll pass back to you, Camila. Thank you.
I had a question. Yeah, so it's difficult, this one, but we've had a couple of questions back. Can you recommend any ethical pension providers and which banks and pension companies are considered to be good to work with? And if you can answer that question, I'll try and see if I can help.
Sure.
Get back in.
Yeah, so just to set out, we don't give financial advice, so we're not regulated for that. That being said, these are questions that we get a lot, mostly in terms of pensions, that sometimes can be a tricky territory to navigate. As a campaign, we're not a switching campaign. And the reason for that is that 95% of members stay in the default fund. So that's a fund that you are first set up with by your provider. And that means that the real impact that we can have, if we really want to have a real impact in terms of the planet today, is not really to switch to it's not that it's, so it has a very good impact to switch into specific funds, but in terms of really putting pressure on the industry and making sure that they change at a default level where the bulk of the money is, really happens when we raise our voices through the current pension providers that we have. So for Joanne and Sonia, who are asking about pension providers, what I'd say is first engage with the one that you have. And for that, you have a very useful guide on our website in terms of really understanding like what good looks like. Then we launched our climate action report late last year, which looked at tracking how the biggest 20 pension providers in the UK were doing in terms of their climate promises that they had, most of them made around COP26 the year before. So we've ranked them with colors on the different kind of aspects that we were looking at. So that includes net zero alignment, but also goes into deforestation, fossil fuel expanders, and even like how much they're invested in climate solutions. So that's a really good place to start. And alongside those resources, you have the toolkit that comes with it, which is a list of questions and best-in-class answers that will help you have that conversation with a pension provider, because sometimes what we're seeing is that we go and ask the pension providers about all of these things. Sometimes they don't really have the answers. And secondly, sometimes what they do is come back with like very long reports that sometimes can be difficult to understand, but also it can fall sometimes in greenwashing. And it's good to see like what the best-in-class answer is and what we're asking of them. So in raising those voices, having those conversations and asking them to be better is a real start on that. You might want to look into, and this is not financial advice, but sometimes in the setup that you already have, you will have the option at no extra admin fee cost to switch into a more sustainable fund that can be aligned to your values. We do recommend for people and organizations to take financial advice before making any of these changes. But what we know is that there are more and more of these pension providers offering this kind of options where you don't have to pay more money to get into these funds. There are also within the guide that I mentioned other resources that we point people to in terms of lists and rankings that other third-party organizations put together, be it like more on the ethical side. So sometimes screening out like tobacco and weapons. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're out of fossil fuels. And that's something that it's good to know. Sometimes we hear word ethical and it's not always green. So there's a lot of information that you'll find there, and hopefully that will help you get started.
Excellent. Now I've got another question, which is about what if work pensions are across a few providers? Is it easy to amalgamate all into one pot? Do you want to answer that question first?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. There's a few services and platforms out there that do that. You could ask first your pension provider that you're with now, if that's something that you could do, but also then you'd have to check if they provide the service, which is like really like moving the existing pots that you have with other providers, and if that will cost you money. So I would start by asking that your current pension provider, but then also there are some specific platforms out there that do that. We worked, for example, I know PensionBee are one that are doing that, and they launched a few years ago a fossil fuel free fund with Legal & General, for example. So you might want to look into that. And in terms of SIPs and SSAS, the sustainable investment options should be available in all of this. And that's why it's about starting with net zero, which is doing no harm, and then checking which companies you are invested in as well. And you might want to check, most of the big providers, or a lot of them, have made a partnership with a platform called Tumelo that helps you see what companies you're invested in through your pension fund. But also what it lets you do, it's during the AGM season that is coming up now in April and May, lets you vote on issues that you care about, so that those pension providers then will know how their clients want them to vote at these general meetings. Doesn't mean that they will specifically, but then you will see not only how people expecting them to vote, but also how they voted, and you can ask them why, if they didn't vote aligned to what you voted.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, there's another question, which is, I've heard about SSAS and SIPS. Do green pensions apply to SSAS and SIPS?
Yeah, so it's what I just mentioned. They should have the options. I mean, I don't know particularly. I wouldn't be able to give financial advice on that. But they generally have those options. And specifically, going back to what I was saying, like with the providers that are providing you this SSAS and SIPS, is checking what they're doing at the default level and asking them if they provide a more sustainable option. From what I've seen, they do.
Excellent. On the question about who are good providers, I know that the sort of ethical consumer does rate the bank accounts, certainly the banking industry, doesn't it? And some of those who come up, and you might have mentioned this, but sort of Triodos Bank or Triodos, who are
Triodos
Bristol.
Bank, yeah.
And Monzo and Starling usually come up in there as early, as kind of being very ethical and being good places to bank. But it's always a situation where you have to do your own research, isn't it? And
yeah, and on that, there's a very useful tool that now is getting updated and with an upcoming launch called Switchit. So they haven't launched their new website. I know from speaking with them for the purposes of our campaign that they will be launching in the next few months, and that should make it pretty easy to understand on the banking side of things for organizations and individuals who want to look at how their bank is doing, and then if they wanted to switch to a bank. It's a completely different conversation for pensions. Another good place that creates rankings and looks specifically at the pensions industry is Good With Money. I'll paste the link here for people who are interested. They make really comprehensive guides in terms of looking at the different pension providers, but also at the different funds. So I'd recommend anyone that has the time and is interested. It's very digestible and easy to read.
Excellent. Yeah, that'd be great if you could. Just because I know that it's one of the big areas that's very difficult, isn't it? It's really difficult to get information about what is, even if they say that they're investing in, they have a sustainability kind of strategy for a particular fund, or what, that it's an impactful investment, or it's really difficult to actually get to the nub of what is that the funds are actually going into, isn't it? So it's definitely worth us giving that. And I think I'm sure clarity will come if we keep asking the question that we want to know, because nothing will change otherwise. So we have to, as pension, as companies and as individuals, we need to keep on asking those questions, because they don't want to lose their customer base. I was at a conference last week, and it was really interesting. There was a question that said, what is driving change in your organization? And it was, there was sort of lots, it was a multiple choice, and there was kind of regulation because it's a good thing to do, and various different options. And the number one reason why these companies, who were all sort of FTSE big companies, FTSE 250 companies, why they were changing was because their customers were asking them to. They felt there was customer demand for this switch. So it was really great to hear, and great, gives optimism. What about the thing just into where actually if you divest your funds, you don't have a seat at the table. So you you know, you can't then be on the, can't vote, as you said, you know, at the board meeting, at the annual general meetings or whatever. What's your feeling about that?
So as a campaign, we're not a divestment campaign. The reason for that being that it takes away the seat at the table and the possibility to influence. So pension providers, because they manage so much money, they have a very powerful voice and seat at that table. That being said, what we're calling for in terms of the industry's active stewardship. So that means in terms of them being responsible of managing billions and trillions of assets under management on behalf of individual members, they have to take into account their views. And in terms of them engaging with the different companies at those meetings that they have, not only at the AGM, but like during the year as well, having a plan whereby they put a timeline and a deadline as well to the type of conversations that they're having, right? Because you cannot really have effective engagement with a company without the threat of divestment, without being able to say like, look, how are you going, what does your transition plan look like? How you're going to deliver on it? Like, what is the timeline on that? Holding them accountable to it, and then saying, well, if you don't by in 3 years, in 5 years, or the different standards that they set out, that we will take away the money. And we know there are some very progressive pension providers who are doing that and are showing their own active engagement plan with their customers. It's not the case for all of them. And that's why, as you were saying, Camilla, as simple as it sounds, the email being sent by an individual member, you're lending the support of a brand of your organization to public actions that call on the industry, has helped us be, and I was showing those successes that we've had. The only reason why we've managed to get those 1.3 trillion already committed, why banks, since we launched the campaign on banks a few months ago, we've seen some of those 5 high street banks already come out with credible commitments on different things, not on everything we'd like to see, but at least it started a conversation, is because they see that there is a customer demand there, and that even if it for commercial reasons other than like regulation and more ethical reasons, they will need to change, because if not, they'll lose out on clients. And what we're saying is that the pension providers that are really getting it and that are being more proactive in terms of the type of conversations that they have with their clients, the type of language that they use, the interfaces that they use in our website, their websites, the more people realize that they want to know about this, the more they're expecting that from the pension providers and the banks. And then at the end of the day, as this, hopefully we don't have to run specific campaigns around this, and people know enough about it that they make these conscious decisions, and then it's something that these industries factor in terms of them making the decisions that they make in terms of climate change.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much to Jacinta and Graham and Andy, and sorry we lost Graham, for today's contributions.